Today I'll be continuing with my scheduled discussion and point spread prediction videos. Today I'll be doing Florida State. So, what happened with Florida State last season has to be the most embarrassing thing to ever happen to a team in college football. So, I'm sure you know the story. They won the ACC. They went 13-0, and then their quarterback Jordan Travis in their 11th game broke his leg. So then he was out for the season, of course. So then, after he got hurt, they hardly had any offense at all in that conference championship game. They couldn't hardly even get a first down. They had to run the Wildcat formation where uh, you snap it to the running back to get anywhere. Mm, So then, they uh, didn't make the 14 playoff, and then they pouted about it, and uh, they claimed uh, to be better than Alabama, uh, who was better than Georgia, who beat Florida State in that Orange Bowl game uh, by 60 points. Well, they had so many players out that what do you expect to happen? Well, I I would expect better than what happened uh, because Florida State claimed to be a better team than Alabama, and that game was like 42-3, I think, at halftime, and then uh, mm, after the first half, Georgia played their second string players, and then they still outscored Florida State 21-0 and a half. So Florida State uh, mm, was still uh, nowhere near as good as Georgia's second string uh, mm, uh, uh, players mm, with Florida State's second string in. So that probably means that uh, even when they both had their first string, that Florida State would have been nowhere near Georgia, which means they would have been nowhere near as good as Alabama. Uh, and uh, mm, so instead of trying to prove that they were one of the four best teams last season, which they obviously weren't, but uh, mm, instead of trying to do that, uh, the program filed a lawsuit, and then the players decided to be big babies and quit on their team because they weren't going to play in a playoff game. Uh, and then they still uh, got to stand there during the game pretending like they cared. Uh, and I've said before that I don't think that uh, players that quit on their team like that should be allowed to be there. If they uh, decide not to play in the bowl game, then they're off the team and they need to get their butts out of there. Mm, uh, uh, and mm, so that was just so crazy. And for example, the year before that, 2022, Alabama, lost two games by a total of 4 points, and they were both road losses. And Nick Saban thought that they were one of the four best teams, but they didn't get in the playoffs because they had two losses, and I do think that they were one of the four best teams then. But instead of pouting like Florida State did, uh, they actually tried to prove that they were one of the four best teams, and uh, the country, uh, and all of their players that were going to go to the NFL played in that bowl game, and they won by a blowout. Even quarterback Bryce Young played, who even before that bowl game was already for sure going to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. So Florida State should have uh, mm, tried to do that. Of course, they still weren't good enough to win, but uh, uh, it might not have been as embarrassing for them. Uh, and after watching that bowl game that you could hardly even call a game, uh, I can't help but think that Florida State is going to be worse this year than they were last year. Mm, I know they brought in a bunch of transfers again, uh, so that should help them. That's really probably why uh, they were so good last year, uh, is because they did so well in the portal. Mm. And as bad as the ACC is, if I was doing conference championship uh, predictions right now, I would pick Florida State to win the ACC again. Uh, but I'm not doing those anytime soon. I won't do them until much closer to the season. So it's possible I could change my mind on uh, that. Uh, mm, and looking at their schedule, mm, uh, they play on August 24th, and what I think will be the first uh, game of the season. Against Georgia Tech. That won't even be played in the United States. It'll be played in Ireland. Uh, and actually, that could end up being a good game. It's one that you would expect Florida State to be able to win, mm, especially if they're going to win the ACC again. But I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being a pretty close one. Uh, and then they have two weekday games. Uh, their second game against Boston College will be on a Monday, and then uh, uh, their game against Duke will be on a Friday. Mm, and this schedule, actually, uh, uh, of course, in the ACC, there aren't really any tough schedules, but this isn't one that you would just really call easy. Uh, it's probably one of the tougher ACC schedules. They do have a tough uh, non-conference schedule. Uh, they have two Power Four opponents, and then they only get one easy win in the non-conference, and really on their whole schedule against Charleston Southern. Uh, but Memphis isn't Power Four, but they're one of the best non-Power Four teams. That's not a given win uh, for Florida State, but it's one that they should be able to win. And of course, Florida, I've said that I don't think they're going to be very good this year, but it's a big rivalry game. So uh, mm, even though it's a home game for Florida State, they should be a lot better than Florida. Mm, Again, uh, mm, uh, they've been a lot better than Florida these past 2 years, but it's still been competitive. So uh, that should probably uh, still be a pretty close game this year. And then the road game at Notre Dame, that's going to be really tough for Florida State. It's going to be hard for them to win that one. Because Notre Dame, I think, is going to be pretty good. Uh, mm, and then uh, in the ACC, Clemson would probably be the team that would have the best chance to stop Florida State from winning the ACC again. Mm, Uh, but the good news is they get that one at home. Uh, and mm, Miami, of course, it's a big rivalry game, and it's on the road, and uh, so uh, mm, Miami has recruited really well these past couple of years. They've not been uh, showing it on the field, but uh, if they can, that will be a really tough one for Florida State. Uh, it's not a given win for them. Mm, uh, and then uh, California and SMU, as crazy as it sounds, those are conference games now for Florida State. And then uh, their first week off comes right before the game uh, against Memphis, so not the best time for a week off. Mm, and then their second one comes at a terrible time, uh, right before that Charleston Southern game, which is just a given win. So this could have worked out a little better, but still, uh not too bad of a schedule for Florida State. Uh, so now, I'll move on to the prediction. So, if you haven't seen how I do my point spreads, go back and watch my Ohio State video, mm, so you can understand it because I explain how I do it in that video. But the games in the green are games mm, uh, where I think that Florida State will be favored to win by a blowout, 20 or more points. Uh, and I only see one of those, Charleston Southern. And games in the blue are games where I think that they'll be favored to win by 10 to 19 points. So, uh, uh, not close, but not a blowout spread. Uh, and I see six of those: Boston College, Memphis, California, SMU, uh, Duke, and North Carolina. Mm, And then games in the purple are games where I think they'll be favored to win by about a touchdown, 6 to 9 points. I see two of those: Georgia Tech and Florida. And then the games in the pink are the games where I think that they'll be favored to win by about a field goal, 1 to 5 points. And I see two of those: Clemson and Miami. Uh, and then uh, the games in the gray are the games where I think that they'll be about a field goal underdog, 1 to 5 points, and they're one of those. Uh, Notre Dame. Uh, mm, so that Charleston Southern game, they'll be favored in that one by 40 something points. They'll destroy them easily. Mm, mm, And mm, the, the Boston College game, they'll probably be favored by a couple of touchdowns, probably about 14 points. Mm, and the same for Memphis. They'll probably be about a 14-point favorite against them. And then I'd say uh, they'd probably be favored by about 14 against California. Uh, mm, then uh, mm, SMU would probably be more like a 10-point spread, because even before that they uh, 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 joined the Power Four, they were one of the best non-Power Five teams. Uh, and Duke, mm, that one, because it's on the road, would probably be around 10 points. And then North Carolina uh, would probably be about a 10-point spread. And then uh, Georgia Tech, right now, I'd say that Florida State would uh, probably be favored by about 8 points in that one. and then Florida. Mm, I think that Florida State would be favored to win by at least 7. Uh, but mm, I'd say it'd be very unlikely that they'd be favored to win by any more than 9. And uh, mm, Clemson, uh, mm, Florida State would probably only be favored by like 2 or 3 points in that one. Mm, uh, and then Miami, Florida State would probably be a 3 or 4 point favorite, mm, and Notre Dame, I think they'd be a 3 or 4 point underdog, and uh, mm, because uh, mm, not just that it's on the road, but Notre Dame to me looks like they'd probably have a little bit better of a roster right now than Florida State uh, does. And uh, that will be it with this video. Mm, Please subscribe, and thanks for watching another video. And I'll make another one of these very soon.